So I'm now going to be demoing a new block that I've just created. This is the scripting block, and it's part of the sort of signal system, so the system that connects things together with wires, etc. The idea is that it's going to allow you to massively simplify sort of complex signal processing, I suppose, by allowing you to just write simple expressions rather than having a whole bunch of wires that tries to express it. So if I put it in, it looks a little bit like a microchip, and you can see that it's got these 4 inputs: so the north, the south, the east, the west inputs, and it's also got the up and the down inputs, even though you can't see them labeled here. So this allows inputs on any of those ports to control outputs on any of the other ports, and you basically decide how it's going to work. So let's say I have a button here. I'm going to connect that up to my script. Sorry. I'm going to connect that up to the scripting block. And here, let's say I'm going to want this to say, "Hi Richard," if the button is on. Sorry about that. I want it to say, "Hi Richard" if the button's on, and "Bye Richard" if it's off. That sounds fine, sounds relatively simple. And you could do this with the existing script, the existing signal routing blocks, but it'd be a bit of a nightmare. But in here, it's as simple as, and it's the north port that's output. So it's as simple as saying that north, or rather if south, so if south is on, then north equals "Hello Richard." Otherwise, north equals "Bye Richard." So if the south input is true, then set the north input to "Hello Richard." If it's false, set it to "Bye Richard." So that's fine. And you can see it's "Bye Richard," as it should be. If I turn this input on, it goes to "Hello Richard," which is very cool. Equally, if you get something wrong, so let's say I don't close these quotes around this sentence. So now you see the scripting block is starting to spark because it's broken. And if I go into it, it tells me why it's broken in a somewhat programmy sort of way. But you can see it's explaining missing the close quote. It says the line where there's the problem. And you can see line number 4, column number 18. And if I counted it out, that would be line 14. And column number by column number basically means space 18. So I can correct that, and it goes back to being cool. Now you can use this for something a little bit less arbitrary than making it say the difference between "Hi Richard" and "Bye Richard." So how about, let's say, when I get too close to the entrance, you want it to tell me to go away. Sorry, let's position that in a way so that it can actually see us. So this is the already existing scanner block. I'm going to tell it just to look for players. And I'm also going to ask it, you can now output a number of different ways of reporting what it sees. So I'm going to use this one where it's going to say the distance, so how far away the thing it can see is, as well as the angles. We're not going to use the angles, we're just going to use the distance. So if I connect that directly up to a screen, then we should see, yeah, so that's what it's basically saying. So you can see the further I go away, the further that first number gets. And these numbers here, you can see are your angles, but we're not going to use those, as I say. So I'm going to connect the output of this up to this script block here. And I am going to say, what input was that? was the east input. So I'm going to say if east is less than 5, then north is going to equal go away. And you could have this connected up to something slightly more aggressive than a message saying go away. And in fact, we're going to play with that in a second. So have I, seems to have got that wrong. East less than 5, north equals go away. Of course. So what's coming in to the east there isn't just the x, isn't just the distance, it's actually this whole thing. So I need to say that I want just the x coordinate, which is the first part. So the x, the y, the z. And now you can see it's working. And if I do go away, it stops saying go away. If I come closer, start saying it again. So you can do all sorts of things with this. You can do, obviously I've shown you sort of asking questions, those ifs. You can do maths, so you know, it's as simple as 5 plus 6. Incidentally, if you don't have a n equals, something like that, it just sends it out to all outputs, which is why it's ending up with 11, ending that, even though I didn't say north is equal to 5 plus 6. So all maths is available in there. You've got logic available, if, else. If you're a programmer, you can also do loops and sort of while, for, that sort of thing. Actually, if I'm honest with you, what this language here is JavaScript. So if you look up JavaScript, then you know how to use this. So that takes us from simple stuff. I'm now going to take you over to what I actually created this block for. I was trying to create something a bit like this, and I will just turn it on. Okay, so what this fellow is doing is, you can see it's tracking me, and it's basically shooting at me whenever it can see me, but equally, if I'm able to get away from it, which actually is quite difficult. Okay, take my word for it that if I was, yeah, there we go. So if it's not pointing at me, it also stops shooting. So you can see here, I'm around here, not shooting at me. Here is shooting at me. So you can see it's got those two behaviors. Both of those being driven off of this sensor block. So again, just like that one over there, I've set it up to output the distance as the x coordinate, the angle up and down as the y coordinate, which we're not using, and the left and right coordinate as the z coordinate. And all of that is in degrees. And so we come out from here. You can see this is our traditional vector splitting block. So it's taking out that z coordinate. So that's the angle left and right. It's piping that out to this comparator block. And if that value is greater than minus 30 and less than 30, you can see that's how that's happening, then it shoots at you, and otherwise it doesn't. So that's how that one works. And this one is again taking that same z coordinate, the left right angle, and it's piping it down here into this stabilizer block, which I think we've covered previously. But the stabilizer block, basically, if the input here would make the left and right broadly correct, this just makes it nicer. So if it tends to sort of swing towards you but overshoot, then the stabilizer block can stabilize, as it were. So you can see all of this works, and you know, it works, it does a good job. It's hugely complicated and it's very confusing. And to be honest with you, I didn't want to create something with this much wiring off the back of it, because it kind of looks stupid. So I wanted to create something that was a bit simpler, and that is where this comes in. So this can actually all be made to work, all of that behavior, just like this. So that's all the wiring that's going to be needed. Obviously it doesn't work currently because I haven't actually told this microchip what to do. So let's start with that, and I'm also going to I'm just going to kill all of this because it's annoying. So I'm going to start by getting that left-right behavior to work properly. So yeah, that's all set correctly. So if I say that that's the west output, so west is equal to up greater than -30 and up, and again I have forgotten that it's not just up, it's up dot z. So I'm actually going to create a variable here, just so that I don't have to constantly refer to up dot z. I can just refer to angle. So angle is greater than -30 and angle is less than 30. Then yeah, there you go. So you can see as I get close to it, it starts shooting. As I move away from it, it stops shooting. Incidentally, I'm just going to exit the game and go back into it because this night is beginning to irritate me. Yes, it is a bug that the day resets whenever you go in and out. But anyway, so there we have that. I am now going to make the left-right behavior work correctly. So all of that you can see is coming off that down behavior. So if I was to make this relatively simple, now I know for a fact that because this is giving outputs in degrees, which tend to be quite large, that those inputs are obviously very large to the rotator at the bottom. So you tend to get the problem that it spins all out in control, and it's actually quite difficult to get back to the scripting block in that case. So I'm going to start by multiplying the angle by 0.001, so a tiny amount, and that is going to be what controls our left-right behavior. And you can see that works pretty well. Let's say I take one of those noughts off. Now you're going to see what happens without a stabilize. So you can see it's broadly right. It just has this nasty overshooting behavior. And it's actually very difficult to get that right, which is why that stabilized block is available. Now, in the same way as the stabilized block, I'm going to deliberately break this just so it stops moving. In the same way that the stabilized block is available, the stabilized function is also available. So I'm going to put this in. And I think I've spelled that correctly. Now, unfortunately, these stabilized things, you kind of need to figure them out for yourself as to what a correct parameters are. It basically takes 3 parameters. The first one is basically how much correction you should have based on the error itself. So that is actually identical to this multiplier we put on the front previously. So I'm going to put that in like that. So this is actually identical to what we already have. But there are 2 additional parameters which are more interesting. The integral one, so the second one, that is proportional to how much error there has ever been in the past. We're not going to use this one. It's relatively rare to want this one, but what this can be for is when you're physically trying to hold something up against gravity. So even when you're at the correct position, you still need some force to keep it there. That's not the case here, so I'm going to put that one as 0. And then the third one is to control overshoot. So the faster it's going, the more it tries to slow it down, so it prevents overshoot. And overshoot is exactly what we have here. So this is something we want to put in here. So you can see I've made the overshoot protection a little bit smaller than the absolute value. That's probably a sensible starting point whenever you're doing this. So I'm going to put that in, and you can see that it's doing a much better job. It comes in, it doesn't constantly overshoot. It overshoots a little bit and then it tracks back towards me. So you can see that is a much nicer behavior. And in fact, it's probably quite difficult for me to get back to the script block. There we go. I've got sufficiently far away that it can't see me anymore. That simple wiring, relatively simple program, and we've got something that's actually pretty cool out of it. And if I was to play with those parameters on the script block with these parameters here, I could get even better behavior. But to be honest with you, it's pretty good just for now. Incidentally, if anyone wants to look more into sort of how to tune these parameters, what they are, this stabilize function is actually a PID controller. So if you want to look on the internet on how these sort of things work, that's what you want to look for, PID controller. And that's because that's the proportional term, that's the integral term, or the sum of all the error that has ever happened, and that is the derivative term, or the gradient of the error at present. So that is scripting blocks. Looks like a microchip, does basically what you think a microchip would do, and makes life much easier.